Welcome, everybody, to Worldly Spiritual with Jibril Khalif Al Sadat and Mark Hunter Brooks. We're going to talk today about something really fun. We're going to talk about spiritual cooking. And Jibril has his chef's hat on. No, it's not his chef's hat, it's a Sufi hat, but he always does it. He looks like a chef. And he actually was a chef for a number of years and very impressive credentials. But he's going to talk about cooking and spirituality, and we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So let's see what happens. Go ahead, Jibril.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah alayhi rabbil alameen. How you doing today? Mark was right, and we're going to talk about cooking and how cooking has a spiritual aspect to it. As Mark alluded to, that I was a cook slash chef. I was a chef, executive chef, for in cooking as a trade for over 40 years, and I enjoyed it. And I used to tell my cooks that they had to take themselves seriously when they cook food, because when they cook food and people eat your food, that you affect every cell in a person's body.
Mhm.
I used to tell them that cooking, you get closer to a person than when you did when you had sex with them, which is true. And the thing about uh, cooking that I've come to believe with in my different travels and stuff like that, and I come to believe it with the help of Mark, who showed me, how it was integral into a part of who I am. Because when I went back, when I first retired from cooking, which was in 2009, even though I cooked for another 10 years after that, I went back to school and I studied, comparative religion and religious studies, and then I studied philosophy. And as you get into new studies and new parts of your life, you tend to let the old parts of your life go, or you think you let them go. And I remember one time when my son asked me, he said, Pops, why don't you cook so and so and so? And I told him, no, I don't cook anymore. Them days are over with. And he said, no, you'll always be a chef. You don't get rid of that, which was true. But I didn't think it was. I thought I could just put that in some case or some lockbox and set it to the side and just forget about it and go on and teach, become a lecturer in philosophy and teach comparative religion and forget all about that. But speaking with Mark, and since me and Mark started talking stuff like that, and he was talking about spirituality, and that's something that I had studied years ago, but I had once again, put it in a lockbox and thought I forgot about it. I wasn't thinking about how spirituality involves cooking, but not only cooking, but philosophy, religion, mysticism, all that comes together. So one day, after speaking to him, and he was talking about cooking and the different spiritual aspects of cooking, I started thinking of myself, and I started saying, you know what, he's right. All that is part of my life. All that is part of who I am as an I. It's not. It's part of what I am, not who I am. It's a part of what I am. Just like philosophy, religion, mysticism, all that is part of me. Islam, all that is part of me. Cooking is part of me too, and it's a great big part of me. So I started remembering the conversations I used to have with my cooks, and how I would try to tell them the spiritual aspects of cooking. And then I thought to myself, okay, you know, you still look like a cook. You don't look that much different. You still are cooking with people, but you're cooking in a different way. You're cooking in a figurative way instead of a literal way. But before we get to that part, and then I'm going to explain about how cooking has a lot to do with alchemy also. Because cooking is an alchemic product where you take a raw
Mhm.
item and you add heat or fire to it and you change it to try to make it something better. But food has always been an integral part of spiritual life. Food is connected with, sacred ceremonies, processes such as song and storytelling. You go to any black church that I know of, because my mother was a Southern Baptist, you always have a kitchen in the basement, or you used to have a kitchen in the basement where they had fried chicken every Sunday, and they had meals down there that everybody could go down there and meal. You go to the mosque, a masjid, right now, they have kitchens in there where they cook food, and you can go there and you can buy food and you can sit down and you can purchase it on holidays. You can eat for free. Food has always been something significant, even in the Catholic liturgy.
Mhm.
When you take the wafer, that is the body of Christ, or you drink the wine, that is the blood of Christ. That's part of eating. When you have the Seder dinner in
Mhm.
Judaism, that's part of that's food. That's people cook every Friday, for Shabbat. When they sit there, and they eat, and they eat the different meals and stuff like that. During the Passover, when they eat the bitter roots, it tells a story about what happened to a people. Food
Mhm.
is a spiritual part of every culture that's on this earth. When you've been away for a long time, or you in a different country or something, and you eat something like, if I'm over in
Mhm.
Europe and I eat a piece of fried chicken or some collard greens or cornbread, yes, I'm that guy. I'm not being that guy. You know, you remember that. It brings you back memory. It's not that you remember the flavors or the taste. You remember that too, but you remember the people that you were with.
And you remember the love that was embodied in all that as well. And I think that's important to say too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I always told my cooks, if you didn't cook with love, if you didn't cook with passion, then the food would not, it would come out in the food, and it has. I remember when I used to cook, and my son was with me, and I would cook, and I would have a cold or something like that. You could tell it in the food. He's like, Dad, this don't taste right. And so I would have him or my cooks or my dishwasher taste the food after I fix it, because I had enough taste memory to know how it's supposed to be, but I couldn't taste it because of the cold, or because I was sick or whatever. So you have to understand that, cooking is also a shared activity. It unites a community, it unites families. It is, as we join to prepare meals. Now, me personally, when I'm in the kitchen, I don't like anybody being in the kitchen with me. I like to cook by myself. For me, it's a meditative process. I like to be in the moment when I'm cooking. But a lot of people like to cook with other people.
Mhm.
It's a joint thing where people get
Mhm.
together and they cook and they have fun and stuff like that. I've used to do stuff like that when I used to go to these competitions and with different chefs, and we get together and everybody cook a different course for a different meal and stuff like that. So that's the way it brings us together, because we are spiritual beings. Even though most of the time we do not want to acknowledge it, that's what we are. And food is a profound doorway into the spiritual growth, because how you experience food is how you experience life.
Mhm.
It's part of it. And people need to understand that, because when cooking becomes an extension of worship, magical things happen. They always do. I know everybody has always cooked something and they like, man, they brought a smile to their face. It made them happy. You can take a kid that is crying and you can cook them something, or you can bake them a dessert, and you can change their whole attitude around, because the magic of your love of that cooking is infused in that dish, and it goes all the way through their bodies. Food tastes better when you enjoy doing it, and it nourishes everyone. And these are the things that you have to understand. You do have to understand that you just can't get up there and just slop something up.
Mhm.
You just can't get up there and say, "Okay, I'm gonna make a soup." I've seen people, they go in the kitchen and they say, "I'm gonna make a soup." So they get a big old stock pot and they fill it with water, and then they just throw stuff inside of it. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" Cooking goes from bottom to top. When you get ready to make a soup, take your stock pan, add a little oil, let the oil heat. You cut your vegetables to the precise size. You drop in your vegetables, onions, peppers, carrots, celery. You start smelling that aroma of that meat pot. Then you throw in your seasoning, a little cumin, a little chili, a little coriander. That starts roasting.
You're making me hungry. Come on, Jibril.
You're smelling that. And then as the flavor profile start building, then whatever you want to do, if you want to make a cream of broccoli soup, take your broccoli in there and you mix your broccoli and all those vegetables. And then you can either add your water or your chicken broth, and then you bring it up to a boil and you let it simmer. So it have time to mix. Then you take your bar mixer or whatever you have and you whisk all them flavors together, add a little cream. If you want to be thick before you add your broccoli, you can add a little roux to it or whatever. And then you add your cream to top it off, salt and pepper at the end, and you made a soup. And you build it up instead of just throwing broccoli, all this stuff in there, and then just and then that's it. And okay, yeah, it'll be a decent soup. It'll be an edible soup. It won't be piss water, but it won't be a good soup. It won't be a great soup. It won't be a soup that warms your soul. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about cooking in a way to warm people's soul, right? And that's why I say when you cook with intention, you learn how to channel your meditation, your prayers, and your stillness into your preparation. That's why most times I like to cook alone. Even when I was chef, everybody knew when I was chef had his station. Nobody goes over there and bother him. Leave him alone. I used to have, in my last restaurant, I had a whole prep room by myself with 2 tables. And I had a stove. I had what they call a tilting skillet. Look it up if you have to. Look it up. It's a big old right there. And I had some steam jacket kettles. And I used to go there and I cut up. First thing I do, I come in and I cut up all my vegetables. Take my time. I come in 6 o'clock in the morning and I sit up there and cut up vegetables, right? And I cut up vegetables and I put them in a hotel pan. If I'm saying all this food service terminology, just Google it and you'll find out. And I would have say I'm gonna make 2 sauces and 3 soups. So I would have 5 hotel pans in front of me. And I would cut up onions and put them in the 5 pans and the carrots and the celery. And then if they had special flavorings, I would cut them up and put them in, the red peppers and it's going to go in this, and the green peppers here, and the potatoes going to go here, and the chowder, and this is that, and this or that. And I would go get, if I'm making a spinach soup, or if I'm making a cream soup, or I'm making a minestrone soup or whatever, I would get the pasta and stuff like that, and I would put it next to each one. And I have it on this big, long, stainless steel table. And I would have my pots. I would have 2 steam. I would have a big steam jacket. I would have a little one, and I would have a stove with pans on it. And I would turn the fire on each one of them. And then when I thought they got hot, I would take my oil and I would go through each one of them. And then when it was hot enough, I would go and take each pan and dump it to each one of them, keeping in mind what I was doing, keeping my mind intact, but also keeping my spirit up. Because before I finished the product, I already knew what it was going to taste like. I already had put that passion and that love in there. And the thing is because we human beings are spiritual beings, we're full of energy, that we vibrate. That's the essence of who we are. We are these vibrations, right? And that's why when you're cooking, these pleasant vibrations become as much part of the food as the physical ingredients themselves.
There you go. So
anybody can go ahead.
I was going to say, so let me just kind of jump in on that one, because and for the people that are listening, watching the video, you can see, and I hope you can hear the love that Jibril is embodying in all this conversation, and how much he has a passion for cooking. But it's as he's saying, it's a spiritual passion, and as you cook the food, you're building that love into it. And I wanted to say there's actually been some scientific work that's kind of supporting what Jibril's saying. There was a professor in Japan called his name is Masaru Emoto, and his last name is spelled Emoto. He wrote a book called The Hidden Messages in Water. And he actually he crystallized water after he had said words or got water from different places, and you could tell by the shape of the crystal whether there was love or hate or a positive or a negative emotion wrapped up in it. So you can say, and what he was showing is that water can embody emotions. One of the experiments that he did or that he wrote about in here is that they took some Japanese school children and they filled up three clear glass jars with rice and put water in it to grow, see if the rice would grow. And in one, they made that the control, didn't do anything with it. But in the other two, they put a label on one that said good, and they put a label on the other one that said bad. And every morning, the Japanese kids, when they got to the good jar, they would say, "Oh, you're beautiful, you're great, you're wonderful." And when they got to the bad jar, they said, "Oh, you're ugly, you're bad, you're evil." And they didn't do anything to the regular jar. And after about 3 weeks, they looked at it. The regular jar was just a regular jar of rice, and there was some growth in it. But when you went to the jar that said you're good, it was growing, sprouting. You had all this life in it. But when you went to the one that said bad, it had rotted. And they were all the same jars of rice. They had the same water in it, the same amount of rice in it. The only thing that was different was what the kids had said, what emotions were embodied into that water. So it's important, as Jibril was saying, to build your food with passion. You're expressing your love through your food. You're expressing your spiritual being through your food. And it is something that's actually being done. So it's important for you to share those emotions through the things that you cook and the things that you do. And I hope you've seen it in and the smile that Jibril has on his face as he was talking about doing all these things, because it really is a passion. It really, really is. Sorry, I just had to jump in and say that because as you were saying all this stuff, I was just sitting there. Yeah. Oh, and also too, he evoked an incredible spiritual experience in me yesterday when he gave me some black bean soup. So I have been a first person, consumer of his love and his passion for cooking. So it was great.
Thank you very much. But the thing about cooking, which, years ago I was into alchemy, which I think is a subject that a lot of people have forgotten about and not a lot of people look into, but it's an excellent subject. Not only the physical alchemy, but also the spiritual alchemy, which a lot of people really don't know. More people know about the physical part of that. So cooking to me, and the reason I got into alchemy, because alchemy always reminded me of cooking. If like I said, there's something else you can Google up, and you probably see some old guy with a hat on and a great long beard, and he's in fire, and he has all these different kind of glass containers around him, and he's trying to do God knows what. It looks like an old, Middle Eastern chemistry professor who's gone mad. So anyway, cooking at the time when I started cooking, I was into alchemy also. And in alchemy, they have something called the magnum opus. The magnum opus is what we call the great work. And that's how I felt every time I went into a kitchen. I usually, opened in the kitchen. I usually stay open to close. So you go into this kitchen, it's cold, you turn on the lights, and then all of a sudden the lights come up, and then you see all this shining. If your cook's clean correctly,
There you go.
this shining, stainless steel around you, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's quiet and it's cool, and it's because that before the place comes alive, and it does come alive. You coming in while it's dead and it's cold and it's nothing there. So the magnum opus is what they call the great work. And that's how I felt every time, every morning, 6 days a week that I went into the kitchen. I felt like I was doing the great work because I knew what food could do to a human body. And in the great work in alchemy, you have what they call the prima materia. The prima materia is like the raw food. But also the prima materia, if you're talking about spiritual alchemy, is like the raw person, right? And when I'm talking about this, I'm only going to talk about food, but I'm also going to talk about a human being also, and how cooking affects both of them in the same manner, and how you want to get the same results. So the same 7 stages of alchemy. I'll try to do this fast. You got calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation, right? And then what are you trying to do is you're trying to connect the human soul with what we call the animal mundi. And the animal mundi is the world soul that operates the whole universe. Right? Some people can call it Allah, some people call it God. The alchemists call it the world soul, the animal mundi. It first came up with Aristotle, and Aristotle has a piece in his book called the Anima. So if you want to read about it, you can read about it, where Aristotle said everything has a soul. Animals, plants, everything. So how we do in calcination, we break down the parts, and so that's what you do with your food too. When through heat, when you're making your soup, you got to put in your meal pot, your vegetables, and you're breaking them down to bring the essence and the smell out. So the same thing we do with a human being, right? All that bad stuff that he has picked up and stuff like that, we try to break it down through heat, through conversation, sometimes through pain, to make them release themselves, to release that energy, to release that hate, to release that anger. Second thing we do is dissolution, where we add water to it to break it down through a little bit more. With human beings, we break it down through water by letting them tear, let them cry it out. Let them bring the tears down and bring it out to the soul. Then we do it with separation. Separation is that we separate the good from the bad. When we cooking, we separate some of the items that we break down in the different flavors. So you don't have individual flavors. You don't have the individual flavor of the onion, or you have the individual flavor of the carrot, or the individual flavor of the celery. We do that also with the human being, where we try to separate the things that are bothering them from the things that they feel good about. Then the conjunction, right, is that we combine all these different atoms together to do a new substance. So in cooking, when you're making your soup, you take the water, you take the oil, you take the mirepoix, and now you combine it together to have a new product. And your soup will start to take form. Same with a human being. You try to let them get rid of the bad. You try to add on the good, and you mix them together to try to build a better human being. Then you have fermentations, where you add things to it, right, to introduce different substance to make something. So we add a little milk, a little cream, to make a little smoothness of the flavor, right, to move it out. In human beings, you give them something extra, something to look onto, something to hold on to, that can build them up and to become a stronger person. Then we have distillation. This is when you purify your soup, right? You take your soup, and like I said, you bring it up to a boil, and then you let it slowly simmer. So those flavor profiles are being built, and they come together. The same thing you do with a human being, right? You slowly try to drag out that baggage, that stuff that's hurting them, the pain. You try to drag that out. You try to distill that out of them. And then the last thing you have is coagulation, where you have things become crystallized in a solid state. You have one soup. After you purify them stuff, you have one soup. You have one good soup. And in human beings, you have hopefully a better person, a better, more enlightened person. And the things that people do, this started out when before the Europeans got to it and started turning to Latin with alchemy. Alchemy means alchema, means land of the dark. It's in Egypt, right? In Arabic, they used to call Hajar al-Falsafia. That's what it was. And what it was talking about was the philosopher's stone. And what is the philosopher's stone? The philosopher's stone was the elixir of life, the thing that adds immortality to life. It was also capable of turning base metals into gold. And with the soup analogy, what it does is it takes all those base ingredients and turn it into a liquid gold, a liquid soup, something that's nourishing, something that's exciting. But what it does on the human level, what the philosopher's stone does, it will turn a human being from that pain to let them understand the glory of their maker, to get them closer to their maker, to let them understand who their maker are. And this is the point where I always understood alchemy as a part of cooking. It was not only to work on the pragmatic side or the physical side of the people that I was feeding, but also you can work on the spiritual side of people too, even if you don't know, because food can change a person and change their attitude. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh no, I'm loving it. I'm just sitting here listening to all this stuff. I was just going to say what you're saying is just incredible in terms of embodying love into everything you do, everything you cook, everything you say, the interactions you have with people, because it's all embodied in this spiritual cooking. And you laid out everything really well with the different steps of alchemy. Is the different steps in changing someone from one type of person into another, and hopefully, from a lesser person into a better being or a bigger and much more enlightened human spiritual person. But I love that process, the way you were describing it. But just the whole thing when we talk about embodying that your own love, your own passion into these things, and the process of actually changing someone from one type of person into another is that it's a great thing to think about, especially for people who are in these different environments where they're trying to change people, they're trying to make people better than they were before, and in one different type of situation as opposed to another. But it's a great model, and it's great to bring in that whole aspect of cooking into spirituality, because it's really embodying that love, embodying that passion for other people, embodying that passion to help, to nourish, to feed, to make people stronger and better. And I just love it. So I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I did. I wanted you to keep on going. I'm still having that spiritual experience from that black bean soup, and just having some residuals in this thing. That was actually really good soup. It really, really was.
I appreciate it. But the thing that we have to understand is with cooking, right? That when we cook, we have to practice staying in the present moment, and become more attentive to our thoughts and as well the ingredients that we use, because it's so easy to slip up on a dish or to add too much salt or too much pepper or whatever. So we need to be more attentive to what we do. But how do we do that? We have to have good vibrations, be positive. We have to have generosity in preparing and sharing our meals, right? Be inspired, cook with a purpose. Take a moment, collect your attention, choose a mantra. Like, a mantra is an act of remembrance. Like when I cook, first thing I say is Bismillah, in the name of Allah, in the name of God. And then as I'm cooking along, sometime I'll say La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. A mantra. There's no God but God. That keeps me going on. That keeps the spirit of Allah in me. That keeps it in my food. It generates into my food and people eat my food. And the last thing is vigilance. Be mindful. Be mindful of what you're doing all the time. Be present, be in the moment, as I've said over and over and over again. Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about, okay, let me go ahead and get this pie in the oven because I got to go pick up little Johnny. No, because that pie is not you're going to rush that pie. And that pie is not going to have its time to absorb all the flavors it needs to absorb, or the love that you have to get to and stuff like that. And the last thing I'm gonna say something from the Bhagavad Gita, because I didn't say stuff from the Quran and I said stuff from the Bible. So this is from the Bhagavad Gita 4:24, right? It says, "See God in everywhere."
Mm-hmm.
See God, it says, "See God everywhere." God is the label. God is also the food. God is the fire. God is the preparer. And God is the eater of the food. God is the reason for eating, and God is the goal to be reached. And if you remember that, you'll understand about spiritual cooking.
Well, this has been great. This has been a fun podcast, and I hope you all have enjoyed it as much as we have, both in thinking about it beforehand and presenting it today. And I hope you'll join us again for another session of Worldly Spiritual with Jibril Khalif Al Sadat and Mark Hunter Brooks. Hope you have a good day. Take care.
Assalamu.